Welcome to the Environmental Awareness Show. It's Thursday, January 27th, 2022. I'm Dean Val here with Dean Kevin and Ronald. And today we're going to discuss the environment. I'm going to start with an article about the Native American Indians and how they were sustainable. It's just a basically traditional article, but it gives you an idea how they took care of and managed and supported the environment. So I'll start with that. What Native Americans teach us about sustainability? When white European settlers came to America, they saw a land rich in natural resources. And this kind of note that this history, again, is different than possibly the Tartarian history that we've been discussing too, and how things were here. But just take note of that and consider that. But this is one viewpoint. There's many viewpoints on our history. But generally, the Native Americans did take care of the land. So the whites looked on the land and saw many things that could be harvested and sent back to Europe to sell. Trees, wildlife skins, tobacco were all in great demand across the ocean. However, what they often overlooked was the rich history of sustainable and well-managed care of those resources. The white man came and said, "This is mine, and I will dominate and use the resources." We all know the sad ending of this story. A land and people were conquered and dramatically changed forever. In this blog, we will discuss how the Native Americans were the first environmentalists on American soil and how their practices can benefit the world today. While many different Native American cultures lived in very different geographic areas in what would become the USA, they had a common collective wisdom. They recognized and understood that all parts of an ecosystem are connected, that humans, animals, plants, and even rocks were dependent upon each other for survival and the well-being of the ecological niche they lived in. We have a rich history of environmental activism. Dina Gilio Whitaker explores the history and where we should go from here. Everything that we do as humans affects the environment in some shape or form. This fundamental belief put the Native American human on equal footing with the animal they hunted for food or the berries they took from the bush. They understood their lives made an impact. And because of this knowledge, they treated nature with a level of respect and admiration that is often dismissed in modern cultures. That does not mean they didn't hunt deer for food. It does mean that they hunted in fall after baby season and that they give thanks and respect to the animal for their contribution to their lives. Native Americans did change their ecological niches to some extent. They cleared areas for houses and fields. These changes were on a small scale, and when the tribe moved to a new location, the land reclaimed itself in a short time. Archaeological digs find remnants of their communities, but those places did not damage the environment. John Muir says, "Indians walk softly and hurt the landscape, hardly more than birds or squirrels." By the way, John Muir didn't have, from some of the history books I've read, he didn't have a great relationship or really respect for the Indians, but that's another matter. Although this quote is nice. This way of working with nature brought them into a great deal of conflict when white settlers invaded America, who had very different views of land management. The early groups, such as the Pilgrims, viewed the land as something to be conquered. They often expressed fear of this strange new world and its inhabitants, not just the people, in their diaries and letters. Today, Native Americans, whites, and other Americans from diverse cultural heritages are working to bring back traditional earth management systems. When we see ourselves as one with the system, we tend to be more respectful in how we treat the planet. A popular political answer is to blame others, other politicians, other countries, the guy down the street. This attitude puzzles me and others of Native American heritage. Blame gets us nowhere. We all must step up to the plate and work together as a team to conquer the blame game and to learn to live with nature. Here's the first Thanksgiving, supposedly. Okay. Self-restraint was an interesting concept with many Native American cultures. The concept of self-restraint comes from the existence of communal living in addition to living in a natural world that may bring unexpected changes. The practice of self-restraint benefits a communal society where the strength of the community equates with survival. And that's what we promote. We promote supporting each other and supporting the environment that supports us, especially the all-natural environment, which includes all levels of existence. We are multidimensional. And by the way, I just watched this little video of this Indian chief talking about the star people and how they had relationships with the star people. They called aliens, ETs, whatever you want to call them. They call them star people. And a lot of their creation stories are talking about how these relationship with these beings were established. By preventing overconsumption of natural resources, the native peoples limited damage to the lifestyles of future generations to come. They left something for the next generation. Is that music going to bother you? You hear it in the background? No? Okay. Repeat. The did not savage the earth for their own means. The Iroquois Confederacy had a philosophy called the seventh generation, which mandates that tribal decision makers consider the effects of their actions and decisions for descendants 7 generations into the future. If you live in a small town, you may understand this level of accountability. Small town discipline often rides on the "I'll tell your mother" philosophy, which honestly works very well. I've seen that play out in small courtrooms in my own hometown. Native American culture had this system of accountability. To tell a Native American that it's all India's fault, that the oceans are polluted with plastics, is a moot point. We all contribute to environmental harm. We all must stand to alleviate that harm. The Iroquois Confederacy government dates back in written form to 1142 AD and was admired by Benjamin Franklin, who based parts of the Constitution on its practices. This system is about relationships, human, animal, and environmental relationships. that affect the quality of our lives and for future generations. Climate change is a big issue and one that affects the entire world. However, we see many American communities looking towards Native American wisdom in dealing with these issues. The Houma Nation of Louisiana's Gulf Coast has seen the effects of climate change ravage the coastal regions. Erosion, damages from the oil industry, and deliberate destruction of an ecosystem. For hundreds of years, they have lived in marshlands and along coastal areas, making a livelihood by fishing, shrimping, and other subsistence practices. The effects of climate change and development have caused massive erosion on the Louisiana coast. The landscape has changed quickly. Islands no longer exist, and pollution has killed off fish and crustaceans. The Houma can no longer teach the next generation their livelihood because it has been destroyed. Coastal marshlands are an important breeding ground for many fish and crustacean species. Traditionally, coastal indigenous groups manage these ecosystems by planting marsh grasses and trees. This promoted a natural cycle where baby fish thrive. Oil companies and commercial fisheries have often cut canals into these lands, destroying this unique waterway and seriously limiting the amount of fish reproduction. Agriculture. We don't often think of the Native Americans as being the first farmers. The stereotype is the brave riding a horse and living in a teepee on the Great Plains. However, as history tells us the famous story, the first Native Americans met farmers. By Tisquantum teaching the Pilgrims' farming techniques, we know they had many agricultural skills. Many cultures had well-developed sustainable agriculture techniques and were proficient in growing crops for large numbers of people. The Cherokee were raising a minimum of 15 varieties of maize before European settlers or settlement that they had bred and were cultivating. Spirituality also greatly influenced growing food. For the Iroquois, the three sisters were the crops, maize, beans, and squash. Today, we still follow their gardening practices of planting these three crops together in a companion and beneficial grouping. The three sisters were also spirits of young women that collectively were referred to as our light. Prayers and offerings of gratitude were expressed to the three sisters in order to show appreciation and thankfulness for the crops. This thankfulness is an important part of sustainability, one many of us in modern cultures lack. The Wampanoag, the tribe that famously kept the Pilgrims alive that first year, taught them many organic farming strategies. They used nature to support nature. Plants, like animals, need food, and the Wampanoag used wood ashes and fish remains in order to support this growth. These natural farming techniques did not harm the land but enriched it. You can read about the natural products I recommend for organic gardening on our garden resource page. Permaculture and regenerative agriculture are farming methods that seek to focus on being natural and holistic. Many farmers in the USA are Native Americans, and a high proportion of them are women. In fact, in Arizona, One half of the farms are owned by Native Americans or tribal nations. The Hopi specializes in dryland farming. This ancient method of agriculture works with the acrid climate of the Southwest. Modern Hopi farmers plant seeds deeper than conventionally taught, and irrigation is minimal. Ramona Farms, one of the larger native-owned and commercial farms in Arizona, is owned by the Button family of the Camille Odom family, the river people, Pima, from the Gila River Indian community. In addition to raising commercial crops such as alfalfa and cotton, they resurrected many older heirloom plants traditionally grown by tribes of the Southwest. They now grow the boff, a type of tepary beans that grow well in drought conditions. This is just another example of working with your environment, with your land, and with your cultural history. Here's a cooking video. Foraging is a great way to get in touch with nature. And I know Kevin has been doing some of that. Maybe he can update us on his dandelion foraging, etc. And add to our food stores by gathering plants in the wild. I wrote about foraging for wild mushrooms in an earlier blog. When we look for wild foods, we can appreciate all that nature provides for us and the hard work that went into providing substance for all members of the group. Indigenous groups teach us that when we forage, we don't deplete the crop. We harvest up to a third of the crop and allow the rest to continue to grow and reproduce. This ensures that there will be plenty of future generations in the next foraging trip. Foraging was an important skill among Native Americans as well as early American colonists. Not only did it provide food and seasoning ingredients, but medicine for sickness. Iroquois records show that over 80 wild foods were gathered. Hunting and fishing were important ways to add protein to the diet. Using all parts of the animal harvested was important. Waste was not an option. Native American tribes often had celebrations to honor the harvest, those for growing crops and for hunting. The first year I was on my farm in Falmouth, Kentucky, I saw the importance of not wasting and appreciating the animals' gifts. I purchased my farm in October of 2006. That first hunting season, I was not yet living on the farm, nor able to protect it while I was gone. Local hunters came and killed 3 bucks. They removed the rack and the haunches and left the rest of the animal to rot. I was shocked at the waste and obvious disrespect for the white-tailed deer who had given their life. Religion and spirituality. By living with nature, Native Americans have learned not to struggle against nature. This was evident in their culture. Native American religions professed interconnectivity to their natural creator or creators. As we learned from the Iroquois Confederacy, Native Americans have understood that our actions on the earth affect generations. Their ancestors relied solely on what the land freely gave them, and we must honor that relationship. Like their ancestors before them, they too want to provide a sustainable future for their descendants. Here's a quote. Native Americans, Alaska Natives, and other indigenous people have a long tradition of living sustainably with the natural world by understanding the importance of preserving natural resources and respecting the interdependence of all living things. Scientists and Native American tribes must work together. I don't know how that's going or going to be going. It doesn't look good. There's often conflict when scientists go to tribal lands to study effects of physical or economic world or on cultures. That's because most of the grants given to scientists are in the arena of control, manipulation, and takeover, as we see from evidence going on today. The scientists want to study how climate change or coronavirus are affecting a population. Well, again, most of the science is to prove that they are right, it's not an impartial science these days, what appears to be, but more of on the lines of proving their agenda. However, scientists must remember, that's my opinion, editor's opinion here. However, scientists must remember to respect the people and not discount them as being uneducated or not understanding. This is a joint effort, one where both parties hope to have a positive outcome. Together we can restore sustainable practices to everyday living. The author here is Ami Vanorio, Cree and Italian, and 28 years of experience living off-grid, certified science teacher. Teaches locally online about organic gardening, herbs, homesteading, Native American spirituality, and wildlife conservation. We could use more of these kinds of people. So that was the article here about Indians and sustainability. And from what we learned from other past shows, this could be possibly, well, it goes along the lines of sustainable. The Indians were managing the environment, but how this was done, it's interesting to find out more about this. If I do, I'll share it in the future, how they did manage their environment with controlled burning and planting. And they said they used charcoal and fish remains, to enhance the soil. And there's so much that we don't know how they really did manage the environment. Here in Mexico with the Indian tribe here locally, I've still yet to visit them, but I plan to visit them and see how they're doing. They're living off grid and managing, just barely surviving. They have no electricity, and I'm just curious how they're surviving and doing with what's going on in today's world.
Yep, thanks, Val. I always appreciate that Native American view, and it's extremely important to keep that in mind as a constant. Interested in the local tribe that you mentioned, or local Mexican Indians, if you will, and wondered why they're choosing to live off grid. I mean, off electric. They choosing that? I mean, it can't be because they can't get a few dollars together as a group and get electricity. Is that right?
They're somewhat suppressed here. They're like the low end on the hierarchy here.
Right.
They're actually, self-isolating on purpose. The tribe is called the Kumeyaay here. They went into originally Arizona and Southern California and northern Baja, but they prefer actually to be away from others. They do come in sometimes with blankets and things that they sell, baskets, but basically they're purposely out of the way.
Off grid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Outside the box. Yeah. Yeah. Right. I got it. Got no problem with them going without electric. I just wonder, as an adaptation, it seems to me it doesn't get too cold, but you're wearing a beanie, and it's going to be 26 here in Florida, 25 degrees with a 10-degree wind chill in Saturday.
Oh,
I think it's going to set a record. And it must be a little bit cold there too.
I'm dressed for it. Well, I'm in a place where it's a little cool. If I step outside in the sun, it's like 10 degrees difference. So it's just where I'm at.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I'm in a cave right here.
Yeah. That's cool. It's a good idea. Put a cafe in a cave. And
They've
out
got
there,
a rock wall built around it. Basically, yeah, it's like subterranean here. It's a little cool.
could you build a actual on the side of the mountain, dig it out, and put in a cavern house easily on the side of the mountain?
It's on a hillside, so they scooped it out here in the lower part of the retail shops are in the bottom here. So it's kind of inside the hillside, some of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. That sounds like a very smart thing to do. You don't even need to build shelter, really. Just, cover it over and wood it in. And about the recycling and foraging and all of that, I've got here, I've been gathering wood for a good number of years now. Whenever I see wood or different pieces of furnitures and other stuff like that, I grab it up, and I've had it stored, and now where I've had most of it stored, I have to move it out of. So I've moved it all out, and I built a shed, and I've built, so we have a little pavilion next to it, an open tent, basically. And I also grabbed a kiosk, or I'm going to grab a kiosk, and it's already built. It's very well built by my neighbor. So that's one thing I just, have always been doing and felt I'm always doing that kind of thing. So I've collected music, same thing. I have a huge world-class music and book music collection because that's, a thing I love. And that's going in the shed. So one idea for people to realize that that's certainly one thing to do. The second idea I wanted to share is about giving freely, giving away everything, sharing openly, not asking for return. And I've been doing that some often or on a regular basis for years, but recently just had an example. We have some oranges. The orange tree is still full with oranges and tangerines next to it. And recently an older couple came by and asked us for oranges, and I said, sure, and gave them to them. And it's nice to meet some other people in the area. And this morning, they had somebody dropped off 12 pieces of grapefruits, beautiful, big grapefruits, natural, like ours, and some bananas. And, I'm sure that was, a direct result of our giving, a couple of days back. So, I mean, that's the way that it really works. And I do that with everything I'm doing, music, uh, on the net, whatever. It's all like it's giving as much as I can. I'm not asking for return, but I do get returns. Um, and as an example, my friend who lives in Florida, I grew up with him in high school. We played basketball together, and he gave me that Mercedes 420e, which is the uh, almost top of the line Mercedes. It's more the sports car, and it is just an awesome, awesome vehicle. It's just awesome, and I had to give him $10 because when you, when you do that, you got to say that gave some. What did you pay for the car when you turn over the title and stuff like that? Okay, so that's another idea that I think relates to the Indian because the Indians are they're not charging for their food. They're not charging their people. Okay, you over there in your tent, come out with the 5 rocks, or we're not going to give you your poi today. Hawaiians, the same thing. But now they commercialize the farms in Hawaii, and you've got pineapples, and they have to ship them out, and all that, requires. But you see, if the big companies did this, not in the way that they're giving away everything, but what they're doing is charging top dollar, and there's and taking. It's all taking, and not really returning back to the environment or the people that paid for it, their products. And I don't mean to say that I want to stop that form of distribution, but what it is that the way that they're doing it is this. Well, we can talk about it in 1,000 different ways. It's selfishness, it's monopoly, it's controlled, and it's dominating. And so now we have a situation here in the food supply distribution because the prices are, I don't know if you've noticed it there or in England, but we're getting, $3.50, $4 a bag of chips, 2 for $7.50 or so. Crazy. The prices are just gone. They're really going nuts, and they're not really reporting it in the way that they should about what the prices are. They gave some kind of increase, the president did, for Social Security or to help people with the price increase of the inflation, but it's about probably about 1/20th of the value of the raised prices. It's very, very moderate adjustment to the prices of food. And they know exactly what they're doing, and they're doing it on purpose. And they do want to genocide out the populations, and they want to get rid of the natives. They want to get rid of the locals, the homogenous peoples of areas, and the older population and the infirm, and they do this very subtle ways and getting everyone addicted to the drugs and medicines and the rest of it. It's absolutely ad nauseum curricula, say critical. They're critical curriculum. And so I can see why the natives are in such a state where they want to avoid, instead of thinking that they're going to be helped by their contact with the cultural or national. So I wrote down that there's 4 forms of bias. There's race, sex, nationality, and religion. And these are the frameworks they use, generally speaking, that a marketing employs within those structures that they consistently employ to develop the controlled behavior. And it is very, very simple. And there is something I wanted to share about the farming, and I'll quickly go into this with just that I saw a guy like us. His name's Tom Bergstrom or something like that, and I just found it by accident. They have a farm in Northern California, and they're distributing, selling, marketing their farm products, and they have a holistic program which includes like informing people about how to do meditations and how to be aware of your body and like that. But he said the whole thing is just about being real with the environment. And I just found this farm. It's in Northern California. I thought it might be interesting. The link I did not put on here, but I'm going to try and get it over there into the chat. But the reason I found him is because he had a sidelight of an astrological kind of thing he called solartiming.com. And I think that's the name of his website or webpage, solartiming.com. And that caught my attention because I'm working with the solar timing and trying to teach people that there's a higher clock at work here, the universal clock. And so that's the reason why I saw his thing, because I typed in something like solar timing as a search and found immediately got him. And that's the good part of the internet. And so that's the finish there.
The old way that the Indians lived, you can't live that now. There's just too many people, and there's just, you need to be able to have all agriculture. And a lot of the Indians just lived off the land. They just, they took animals when they needed to eat, and they grew what they could, and simply because they didn't have tools like, saws and knives and hatchets and stuff like that, tools that you need to survive in. Cut wood, break it up, build a house, a warm house. And I can't see it having anybody live in a tent. How you would even try to stay warm, or how you even could. So you can't live like they used to be in the old days. You have to create a new system. But the rich people aren't going to allow you to do that because they're too busy controlling everything, and they got those $100 million yachts they've got to keep up. So we got a problem, and I think small communities is the way to do it. And large towns ain't going to make it. That's why small towns do so good, and people seem to know each other and get along. They know what each person needs. It's a whole different system. And by the way, I live with a tribe of Navajos. My wife's half Navajo. My mother-in-law was 100% Navajo. So I can tell you, we're all well domesticated. And the farms in Arizona, most of them are guys they're in it to make money like everybody else. So you got the good and you got the bad, and you just got to figure out how to get along. Can we all get along? I don't know, that do me.
Thanks, Ronald, for your comments. Thank you. Give it over to Kevin there.
Yeah, I was going to continue on with the Tartarian article I started sharing last week in regards to how the huge slave trading operation was actually nothing of the sort. And in fact, it was the enslaving of the Tartarians that were already present in the country that was taking place. And I probably will go into that because I have another article here, which is a little more in line with what we're talking about. It's a very brief article, so I can share this, open up the comments, and then we can see. I might have time to do a little bit more of the Tartarian article. But this I pulled up and it's the only one is almost half a page, so it's not very long. Oh, it's quite interesting. Is in regards to the Anasazi, who were a North American, Native American tribe. And the source of the article was from ALLiansfandom.com. So you might have an idea about where this is going. Okay, so I'll read this. The following information was sourced from the site ALLiansfandom.com, and the title of the article, Anasazi. The Anasazi are an ancient people that lived thousands of years ago in the desert canyons in the southwest of North America. They are often suspected to have had some connection with aliens. According to believers, the Anasazi either had seen aliens, were abducted by them, or were aliens themselves. There are indeed some facts that could be interpreted in such a way. The name Anasazi has a meaning in the old Navajo language. It can be translated as ancient strangers or ancient enemy. Replace stranger by alien, and you could say that the Indians thought the Anasazi were aliens or beings from another place. The Anasazi first appeared as a people around 1200 BC. There are some indications in Indian legends that they arrived from the west by ships. Archaeologists find some similarities with ancient cultures of Central America. Over many centuries, the Anasazi lived in the North American Four Corners, the area where New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, and Utah meet. They developed a typical advanced architecture and religious life. They have left behind many petroglyphs and other rock art, through which we get an impression of what they saw or believed. They built an astronomical observatory and used a ceremonial calendar to plan their daily and religious life. Another remarkable phenomenon is the elaborate road system. In their dwellings, they constructed a central hole in the floor, representing the entrance from the underworld, third world, into the fourth world on Earth. In the 13th century AD, the Anasazi suddenly disappeared. Some traces of their culture can be found in modern-day Indian tribes like the Hopi, but this is not enough to prove that the Anasazi just packed their bags and left for another location. On the other hand, the idea that they left by spaceship also remains speculative, of course. aliens or not, there are enough similarities with other ancient sites around the world, such as Stonehenge, to say that the Anasazi were the bearers of a global ancient culture. As members of that culture, they had knowledge of astronomy and an understanding of the universe. Their disappearance remains a mystery. The link to this site can be found in the description of this video.
Well, like I said, I just saw this other Indian talking about his relationships with the aliens. So that it's all over the Native American stories and legends. So very well, they could be, they could have been taken off planet. Anybody else have anything on that?
How about if they just got starved out and had to leave and move to a different area? You know, they moved a lot back in those days. They had to migrate, and very likely either sickness took them out or they had to move because of the environment.
Yeah. I just learned about the
That's something.
Spanish flu, how that was manufactured too, by the Rockefellers, by the way. Because Fort Riley, they experimented on the soldiers there in the, whatever it was, 1913, 1918. And that from their soldiers it spread into the Spanish flu epidemic that also was manufactured. So these things have been going on for a long time. Manufactured, even in the old days, and supposedly, in the past history, which we don't really know what happened. These things are going on. Mass pandemics purposely done to wipe people out.
Val, if I might add, about the Mexicans and Aztecs and so forth, there's a number of references to their actual visitations to North America, which is, I think, been highly suppressed. And I'm going to include Southeast Florida, and that is southeast of the U.S. and northern Florida, Georgia, and swamplands, and then also California, Mexico. And some of these shows, New Mexico and Arizona, Colorado, some of these shows that are cashing in on the gold rush fever idea and the mining of, and there's one that is about a site in Utah that they think there's some kind of I don't know what, some kind of a coyote being or something that attacks the miners and the visitors to the area in the off desert or out in the away from the populated, and they're mining in this area. These white people now in the show, primarily white people, and so when they're mining there, they're doing these films, and they're talking about being that something happened at night, etc. But what's happening is that these ancient lands that they called holy, that the Indians called holy, were partially because they had been, part of it is some kind of a relation to the alien visitation and invasion, but also that the history is of the Mexican Indians, will say, that migrated up, or maybe they originated in the U.S. state territories, or they came to these Utah, Arizona areas to mine, or in addition, I'm going to add the Spanish who came and were looking for the lost city of gold and all of that mystery history. So they don't know the actual history, but it is evident that on the north part of the Grand Canyon, which is the Four Corners area, and over to Utah or Utah above, and Colorado and New Mexico, in that zone, there is evidence of having brought the gold from, or the possibility of the gold being brought up from Tenochtitlan, as an example, in Mexico, where the big pyramid is. That the what happened there was the Indians surrendered all their gold, or the Aztecs, to the visiting, invading Spanish and conquistadors and Cortez. And I had a dream once of this experience. I was one of the Indians, and we had the gold laid out at our feet as the offering, freely giving to the Spanish. Of course, the story is what happened was the Spanish were thinking we were still, part of it was holding out on them, and part of it was just pure greed and wanting to take everything. And the Indian population was decimated, and that's probably some relation to what happened in Canyon de Chelly and in Chaco Canyon and the Arizona Four Corners area. Of course, that area had already been mined by the alien Orions and such, had come, and that you can see the evidence of the mining, the huge mining operations that had to have cut out the mountains and those monuments that are still left over in Sedona Canyon in Arizona, etc. All of those places are historical records. I went to the Canyon de Chelly many years ago, and on the side of the canyon, up top, looking down, I had various different experiences, of either remembering this or knowing that it happened. And also, what I realized were that these places were what you could call portals or doorways. And when I was sitting over the canyon in Canyon de Chelly, it was very close to the border of Utah, and I felt very clearly that the canyon itself was the portal. Or maybe what I'm remembering was that this was actually the mining center. The canyon was a mine that was mined, and that was the portal for however the aliens came to remove the resources and the minerals, not just gold, gems and everything else, and or the delivery portal system. It's not that different from what the white business people are doing now here, where they're mining humanity emotionally, physically, mentally, sensationally, physically with the resources. And all of it is a form of mining human souls, if you will. So I've got a long history of memories on this, and I think we all do in a way without knowing that we're remembering. Thank you, Val.
Yeah, well, we know this is a human farming planet. It's whether it's minerals, human organs, people's basically, tap lining people so that they're slaves, in their awareness. And it's ongoing. It's just showing up now. All deception shows up. I want to ask Ronald if you want to share anything about your Navajo experience with your wife, or you live with the Navajo. You want to share anything with that? How they were with the environment or anything else?
Well, sure, they're with the environment. They like living off the land. My wife would talk about they would go up to, when they raised a lot of sheep, and they would live right there with the sheep on the land. And they got, they live long lives. Her mother's father lived to 104, and she lived to, being 100% Navajo, she lived to 97. And, but the problem is they're starting to get into more of the fast food stuff, and it's killing them. They have quite a bit of sugar diabetes there, and it's epidemically there. They fell, they pretty well fell into the same problem that we have as humans. They get lazy, and when you're lazy, you do a lot of crazy things, and that's the problem. Yeah, my wife refers to me as Custer's last stand.
That's funny, because
Yeah.
I was at Custer's last stand, but I do want to say, us natives, we all have a sweet tooth, we got a tooth for sweetness, actually, which is a really good thing. So,
Kevin, you said what is your topic for the Tartarian? Probably next week. Do that. What is the topic again?
Well, it was in regards to contradicting the official history of the great slave trading and distribution of slaves that occurred during the mid-1800s. And this article suggested that, based on the official figures, it would have been impossible for them to transport the numbers of slaves they did, considering the number that were transported over the time period that was officially recorded and recounted, and also the size of the boats, the technology as it was back then in regards to boats and transportations means the figures don't add up. And I think they said on the article there must have been about 20 million slaves then unaccounted for, if the official histories were correct. And it suggested that, in fact, it wasn't so much that the slaves were being transported, but it was that the remaining survivors of the Tartarian era, the Tartarian people, were actually enslaved on their own lands. And the cover story was that these were slaves were being transported from other countries, but it wasn't actually the case. And that was basically the article sourced from a truth, a plaintruth.info, I think.
And we'll complete that.
Yeah.
I'll bring in
Great.
some other Tartarian news with the environment, related to the environment with them. It's kind of an interesting topic next week.
yeah, I wrote up here, why eat according to solar timing? That is in the chat. It's solartiming.com, a farm in Northern California. And the article's titled at the head of it, why eat according to solar timing? I think that sounds like an interesting topic as well. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
And I put the site, you can check it out.
Thanks, Peter. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's January 27th, 2022. This is the Environmental Awareness Show. We usually end with a new you, which is your ticket to greater awareness. New you. Ronald?
You.
Peter?
New you.
And Dean Kevin?
New